Imagine it's the 8th of July, 2014. You're standing in the Mineirão in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. The air feels heavy. The noise is not just loud, it is desperate. Yellow shirts fill the stands. Drums roll. Cameras flash. A whole nation is trying to believe that pain can wait one more night. Neymar is injured. Thiago Silva is suspended. But this is still Brazil, in a World Cup semifinal, at home. People expect fear, pressure, maybe chaos. They do not expect history to explode in front of them. Then it happens. A loose ball drops inside the area. Miroslav Klose reacts before anyone else. First shot saved. Second, touch buried. In one violent second, the net shakes, the stadium gasps, and football history changes forever. Klose has scored his 16th World Cup goal. He has passed Ronaldo. He has climbed above Gerd Müller. Above Just Fontaine. Above every name that had ever lived in World Cup folklore. And somehow, that record-breaking goal is only the beginning of the nightmare. Brazil are not just beaten that night. They are broken. If you love untold football stories and hidden moments from the beautiful game, subscribe now. Because the story you're about to hear changed football history forever. Because this story is not really about one goal. It is not even about one striker. It is about the strangest club in football. A secret hall of killers who arrived every 4 years and turned the biggest stage on earth into their private hunting ground. Some did it with elegance. Some did it with cruelty. Some did it in one impossible month. Some did it across 4 tournaments and 20 years of pressure. Some won everything. Some left in tears. But all of them found the same truth. In the World Cup, 1 goal can make you a hero. 10 goals can make you a legend. And if you score enough, you stop. Belonging to your country alone, you belong to football history. We freeze this story at the end of Qatar 2022. The top 30 World Cup scorers read like a map of the game itself. At the edge of that map sit men on 8 goals. Rudi Völler, Diego Maradona, Oscar Miguez, Leonidas, and Guillermo Stable. And even that line is not as simple as it looks, because ties crowd the border of immortality. Rivaldo, Cristiano Ronaldo, Neymar, and Harry Kane reach the same total too, which means the cut line moves depending on the record book you open. That is the first mystery in this story. The top 30 is not a perfect staircase. It is a battlefield full of ties, eras, different formats, and different numbers of matches. Before we go higher, stop for a moment and think about those 5 names on 8. Guillermo Stable was there at the very beginning in 1930, the first World Cup's top scorer, a man who played only 4 World Cup matches and still scored 8 times. He felt like football before television became king, before global branding, before the sport learned how to preserve its myths on endless replay. Leonidas, the Black Diamond of Brazil, lit up 1938 and finished as that tournament's top scorer with 7. Oscar Miguez was one of Uruguay's forgotten executioners, scoring during the age when his country still walked into World Cups believing destiny belonged to them. Rudi Völler gave West Germany sharpness across the late 1980s and early 1990s. And then there is Diego Maradona, maybe the most surprising name in this zone. 8 goals only. 8 for a man who felt larger than the game itself. But that tells you something important. The World Cup scoring chart does not measure beauty, gravity, or control. It measures the coldest part of all, who finished. Maradona's place is especially revealing. In Mexico 1986, he did not just play football. He seemed to bend reality. He scored only 5 goals in that tournament, but his influence felt like 50. He dribbled through England, manipulated tempo, dragged defenders into panic, and carried Argentina on his shoulders. Yet on this list, he remains behind pure penalty box predators. That is one of the themes running through our entire documentary. The World Cup's greatest players are not always the World Cup's greatest scorers. Sometimes the artist sits below the assassin. Then we move into the 9-goal club, and suddenly the board begins to thicken with giants. Ademir of Brazil, Vava, Eusebio, Jairzinho, Paolo Rossi, Karl-Heinz, Rummenigge, Roberto Baggio, Christian Vieri, David Villa, 10 men, 10 different ways of surviving the biggest pressure in sport. Ademir's 9 goals came in the most painful Brazilian tournament of them all, 1950. Brazil did not even need to win the final round decider against Uruguay. A draw would have been enough. The country was already celebrating. Newspaper front pages treated the title as done. Then the Maracana was silenced. Brazil lost 2-1 to Uruguay in front of the biggest crowd ever officially recorded at a World Cup match, 173,850 people. Alcides Giguier later said, "Only 3 people have managed to silence the Maracana, the Pope, Frank Sinatra, and me." Ademir finished as top scorer, but his goals lived in the shadow of a national trauma. That is another truth of this list. Goals do not always protect you from heartbreak. Vava was different. He scored in 2 World Cup finals in 1958 and 1962 and helped Brazil become champions twice. He is one of the earliest examples of a striker who reserved his calmest touch for the greatest nights. Eusebio gave Portugal 9 goals in one dazzling 1966 campaign, including 4 in that wild comeback against North Korea. Sealer scored in 4 different World Cups, a symbol of reliability long before the modern obsession with longevity. Jairzinho scored in every single match at the 1970 World Cup, a run so clean and so relentless it still feels unreal. Paolo Rossi began Spain 1982 looking broken, rusty, and unwanted. He had returned from a ban. He failed to score in Italy's first 4 games, and the Italian press mocked him as a ghost. Then everything changed. Against Brazil, in what Rossi later called the match of the century, he scored a hat-trick. Afterward, he said, "After the game, I immediately looked for Birzit. I owed it all to him." Finished the tournament with 6 goals, including strikes in the semi-final and final, and turned suspicion into immortality in the space of 1 week. Roberto Baggio's 9 belonged to a different emotional register. He was not just a scorer, he was sorrow, wrapped in genius. He burned through USA 1994 with 5 goals and carried Italy from the brink to the final, only for football history to freeze him forever beside that penalty miss in Pasadena. Christian Vieri, by contrast, was brutally direct. 9 World Cup goals in just 9 matches. 1 goal per game. No decoration, no apology. David Villa gave Spain 9 across 3 tournaments and was the blade at the front of the side that ruled world football around 2010. Rummenigge, elegant and determined, gave West Germany 9 across 3 World Cups. This level of the chart is where you realize the World Cup has no single striker type. There are sprinters and poachers, ghosts and leaders, artists and bullies. The only thing they share is nerve. And then comes the 10-goal line, where the air starts to feel thinner. Thomas Muller, Gabriel Batiste, Toda, Gary Lineker, Gerziger's Lotto, Teofilo Cubelas, and Helmets ran all reached double figures. That is not just a milestone. It is a border. Once you cross 10, you are not visiting football history. You are moving into it. Batista may be the purest number 9 on the board. At his best, he hit the ball like it had insulted him. He remains the only player to score hat-tricks in 2 different World Cups, one against Greece in 1994 and another against Jamaica in 1998. That alone tells you how repeatable his violence was. Gary Lineker did not need tricks. He found space, stayed calm, and scored 6. In 1986 and 4 more in 1990, Gerziger's Lotto gave Poland 7 in 1974 and reached 10 overall without ever winning the trophy. Proof that some World Cup scorers become legends even when the medal never comes. Teofilo Kabilas was Peru's jewel, a player Peel himself once praised as the new Peel. He scored 5 in 1970 as a 21-year-old, and 5 more later, blending imagination with finishing. In a way the numbers alone cannot fully explain. Helmut Rahn belongs to one of the greatest shocks ever seen. West Germany's 1954 victory over Hungary. The miracle of Bern still feels like a story football borrowed from cinema. Rahn scored the winner in that final and ended his World Cup career on 10. Thomas Müller is almost the modern answer to those older instincts. Not flashy, not dramatic. In style, not built like a superstar poster boy, but devastating. He scored 5 in 2010, 5 more in 2014, and turned half spaces, rebounds, and timing into an art form. He seemed to understand where a World Cup goal would appear a second before the rest of the stadium did. Before we continue, I want to hear your opinion. What do you think really happened here? Let me know in the comments. Now the climb becomes serious. 11 goals. Only 2 men reached that level by the end of Qatar 2022. Jürgen Klinsmann and Sandor Kocsis. Klinsmann was the face of Germany's competitive stubbornness in the 1990s, scoring in 3 straight World Cups and helping his country reach at least the quarterfinals every single time. He mixed movement, aggression, and intelligence. But Kocsis is where the chart begins to feel haunted. 11 goals in one tournament, Switzerland, 1954. Not across a career. In one tournament, 5 matches. That is a goals per game rate that sounds invented. Hungary in 1954 were terrifying. They scored 9 against South Korea, 8 against West Germany, 4 against Brazil, 4 against Uruguay. Kocsis was the spear point of what many still call one of the greatest teams never to win the World Cup. That again is why this list is richer than a simple ranking. It also archives football's greatest absences. Kocsis should have lifted the trophy. He did not. Just like Fontaine later, he scored enough goals in one summer to live forever, yet not enough to carry home the cup. And now we reach the names that change the emotional shape of the World Cup itself. Kylian Mbappe with 12. Peel with 12. Lionel Messi with 13. Gerd Müller with 13. Gerd Müller with 14. Ronaldo with 15. Klose with 16. This is the high altar. Every name here feels like its own film. Start with Kylian Mbappe. By the end of Qatar 2022, he had already scored 12 World Cup goals in just 2 tournaments. 4 came in 2018, when he became only the second teenager after Peel to score in a World Cup final. Then came the chaos of Lusail on the 18th of December 2022. France were dying. Argentina were close to touching the trophy. Mbappe changed everything in seconds. Penalty, volley, then in extra time, another penalty. Hat-trick in a World Cup final. He's the first man to do that since Jeff Hurst in 1966. He still lost. That is almost too cruel for words. He left Qatar as the tournament's top scorer with 8, and as the all-time top scorer in World Cup finals with 4. And he was still only 23. Some players climbed the scoring chart. Mbappe attacked it. Peel's 12 feel older than the modern game and younger than all of us at the same time. He scored 6 in 1958 as a 17-year-old, including in the final, and gave the World Cup a new image of what genius could look like. Not just skill, joy, fearlessness. Revelation, he added. 1 in 1962, 1 in 1966, and 4 more in 1970. Finishing with 12 in 14 matches. What makes Peel so unique is that his goals never lived alone. They always seemed tied to a larger feeling, as if football itself was stretching its possibilities when he touched the ball. Lionel Messi arrived at Qatar 2022 carrying a burden almost no player in history has known. Greatness had never been the question, but for many, the World Cup remained the unfinished chapter. He answered with 7 goals in one tournament after scoring only 6 across his previous 4 World Cups combined. By the end of the final, his total stood at 13. More than that, he had scored in the group stage the last 16. The quarterfinal, the semifinal, and the final of the same World Cup. It felt like a complete journey rather than a simple hot streak. Messi on this list matters because it shows how a playmaker, a conductor, a chance-maker, and an era-defining genius eventually forced his way among the pure finishers too. Then there is just Fontaine, maybe the most impossible scorer of them all. 13 goals, 6 matches, 1 tournament. That alone would be enough. But the story gets stranger. According to FIFA, Fontaine ignored orders and took only 1 pair of boots to Sweden because he did not even expect to play. Then, in the final training session before France's opener, he ripped one of them. "I was devastated," he later said. A teammate, Stefan Brui, lent him a pair. In those borrowed boots, Fontaine scored a hat-trick against Paraguay, a brace against Yugoslavia, the winner against Scotland, 2 against Northern Ireland, 1 against Brazil, and 4 against West Germany in the third-place match. He averaged a goal every 42 minutes. Football will probably never see that again. If you are still watching, you're exactly the type of football fan this channel was made for. Subscribe for more forgotten football history. And now, the final 3. Gerd Müller, Ronaldo Miroslav. Close 3 names, 3 different meanings of greatness. Gerd Müller scored 14 World Cup goals in just 13 matches. Think about that for a second. 14 in 13. FIFA's analysis of his 1970 run makes it even more absurd. 10 goals in that tournament alone, all from inside the penalty area. 5 from inside the 6-yard box. He was not a dribbler in a glamorous sense. He was not a poet. He was a solution. Tiny movements, balance in traffic. 1 turn, 1 touch. Goal in 1974. On home soil, he scored the winning goal in the final against the Netherlands. For decades, his World Cup record stood like a monument nobody could move. He was not simply a scorer. He was an argument for efficiency as art. Ronaldo's 15 might be the most emotional set of goals on the list. In 1998, he arrived in France as the most feared player in the world. Then came the mystery before the final. Illness, confusion, hospital visits, endless debate in Brazil. He started the final against France, but looked like a shadow. 4 years later, many were not even sure he would make it back. He suffered 2 catastrophic knee injuries. Specialists wondered if he would ever truly return. But in 2002, he came back with that famous haircut, those explosive legs, and a hunger that made every touch feel personal. He scored 8 in Korea and Japan, including 2 in the final against Germany. After the victory, he said, "Winning the World Cup sets the seal on my fight and my recovery." Later, he added, "Today, I just want to celebrate. I'm so happy." Those 15 goals are not just numbers. They are proof that football sometimes gives second lives. And finally, Miroslav Klose. Maybe the least flashy man in the top bracket. No giant brand. Aura, no cult of personality. No myth bigger than the matches themselves. Just timing, headers, movement, and honesty. He was a late bloomer. A striker who had been playing in the lower reaches of German football not long before his international breakthrough. In 2002, he scored 5 World Cup goals, all with his head. In 2006, on home soil, he scored 5 more and won the Golden Boot. In 2010, he added 4. Then came Brazil, 2014, 1 more against Ghana tied. Ronaldo, 1 more against Brazil in that semifinal, put him alone at the summit with 16. Klose did not seize the record in a final. He seized it in the middle of a national collapse, so shocking that even his own achievement seemed swallowed by the 7-1 scoreline. And somehow, that makes it more cinematic, not less. Football history changed in a moment, almost too chaotic to absorb. But here's the controversy at the heart of this whole subject. Who is really the greatest World Cup scorer? Is it close because 16 is 16 and records are records? Is it Ronaldo because his peak felt more destructive? Is it Gerd Müller because 14 and 13 may be the purest ratio among the all-time leaders? Is it Fontaine because 13 and 6 matches sounds completely insane? Is it Mbappe because he did things in finals that nobody else has done? Or is it Messi, whose World Cup scoring only became fully complete when he carried the weight of a whole nation to the trophy? The evidence points in different directions depending on what you value. If you value total volume, Klose is king. If you value efficiency, Gerd, Müller, and Fontaine have cases too strong to ignore. If you value the biggest moments, Mbappe, Peel, Ran, Veva, and Ronaldo become impossible to dismiss. If you value the blend of scoring and total influence, Messi and Maradona demand inclusion in a wider conversation. And if you care about how the World Cup changed over time, the debate becomes even more difficult. Early tournaments had fewer matches. Later ones gave players more games, more recovery science, more tactical support, and sometimes more penalties. Some players feasted in group stages. Some delivered in finals. Some had only one great summer. Some kept coming back for 16 years. This list looks objective. In truth, it is full of subjectivity, hiding behind numbers. That is why the hidden details matter so much. Stable scored 8 in just 4 World Cup matches. Fontaine used borrowed boots. Akochis hit 11 in 5 games and still lost the final. Kietste alone scored hat-tricks in 2 different World Cups. Vieri managed 9 and 9. Salenko became the only Golden Boot winner not to reach the knockout rounds after scoring 5 in 1 match in 1994. Paolo Rossi went from ghost to champion. In days, Mbappe scored a final hat-trick and still walked away defeated. Ademir was top scorer in a tournament his country can barely talk about without pain. Maradona sits lower than many pure finishers because the list cannot measure dribbles, gravity, or fear. Even the edge of the top 30 is unstable because ties stack on top of one another. The chart is real, but it never tells the whole story on its own. And maybe that is why these players stay with us. Not because of the neatness of the ranking, but because each total carries a world inside it. Kubela's fury, Kubela's imagination, Jairzinho's unstoppable 1970 run, Sealer's longevity, Baggio's tragedy, Villa's precision, Klinsmann's relentlessness, Leto's efficiency, Peel's youth, Messi's completion, Ronaldo's redemption, Klose's quiet climb. Every number on this board is really a memory disguised as a statistic. If this story surprised you, hit like and subscribe. It helps more football fans discover these incredible stories. So let's go back to that opening night in Belo Horizonte. Klose has just scored. The ball is in the net. Brazil are still trying to breathe. Somewhere in the stands, fans understand only half of what they are seeing. They know their team is in danger. They do not yet know they are watching the end of one era of World Cup scoring and the crowning of another. What happened next is now part of football folklore. Germany kept scoring. Brazil kept collapsing. The final score became one of the most brutal in World Cup history. 4 days later, Germany won the World Cup. Klose did not score in the final. He did not need to. His place had already been sealed. And that is why this story still matters today. Because the World Cup scoring chart is not just a list of strikers. It is a timeline of fear. A timeline of pressure. A timeline of the men who could still think clearly when the lights were brightest and the noise was loudest. Some reached the top with elegance. Some with violence. Some with borrowed boots. Some with repaired knees. Some with teenage bravery. Some with veteran patience. But all of them answered the same question. When the whole world was watching, could they finish? That is what makes these 30 names unforgettable. They did not just score goals, they trapped whole generations inside moments. A hat-trick in borrowed boots, a final one after a shattered knee. A nation silenced in the Maracana, a ghost reborn against Brazil. A teenager from Bondi almost stealing a final on his own. A quiet German walking past every legend who came before him. This documentary is based on historical records, interviews, reports, and publicly available information. Some claims and theories discussed remain disputed. Viewers are encouraged to explore the evidence and form their own conclusions. This video isn't for every football fan. But if you know someone who loves football history, share this story with them. Subscribe to Football Vault History, and I'll see you in the next documentary.